This is Jeffrey Friedland. Welcome to another edition of Insider Talks at Emerging Technology Insider. Today, I'm delighted to have with me Faris Alami, CEO of International Strategic Management, or ISM. Faris is joining us from Michigan. Welcome, Faris.
Thank you so much, Jeff. Appreciate it.
Faris, to get started, can you provide our viewers with an overview of your professional background? I found especially impressive and interesting some of the things you did outside the United States.
Well, thank you. You're very kind. Yeah, I've been lucky in so many ways and fortunate to have worked with some of the amazing groups all over the world, from Department of State to U.S. embassies to World Bank to everything else in between, local government or international government. And I'm very fortunate to have such experience. And then on the ground, I was lucky also to work with many entrepreneurs or leaders trying to make change in their communities specifically for small business development or startup development or innovation or mentorship. So it's been an amazing journey for me personally, and it's really, I couldn't even dream of being able to do the things that I'm doing today. Thank you so much for asking.
Let me just ask you sort of a question on that. We talked the other day, you told me you had, done some events in Oman. Can you tell us about some of those? Because I just think they're fascinating, and who sponsored, who attended, and et cetera.
Sure. So we've done a few things actually, if you want to specifically speak about Oman. So
Oman. We don't have to talk just about Oman. I mean, there's other countries too, which I think would be.
Yeah, they're all similar. You're absolutely correct. They're all similar. So some of the times I'm invited, for instance, I was a keynote speaker for Global Entrepreneurship Week, and that was the Ministry of Commerce invitation to go speak there as one of their keynote speakers about entrepreneurship during Global Entrepreneurship Week in November a couple of years ago. We also have done some other things such as boot camps and hackathons. We've done that in Belarus and in Myanmar, and some of our sponsors have been in the past in collaboration either with U.S. Embassy as well as a local vendor or a local organization, usually nonprofits. Our work, as you know, is an economic development agent, work around entrepreneurship, around small business development, talent development. So usually some kind of economic development agency locally, and then maybe sponsored by a larger institution. That's how we've been lucky to be able to do such work.
That's great. Faris, sort of building on, your personal background, can you just give us a quick introduction to your company, ISM, or International Strategic Management?
Sure. Yeah. So International Strategic Management, initially we started as actually by providing technical assistance, if you could call it that way, business planning, strategies, marketing, website building back in early 2000s, supporting initially, I'm going to call it minorities or underserved communities or immigrant groups, really specifically the entrepreneurs themselves. As I was trying to navigate myself, I was able to help other people unfold what they could use to start their business or grow their business. And that's really how we started. And with time, we started learning that there are all kinds of other institutions that provide services. So we, about 2008, 2009, shifted our strategies from providing direct technical assistance to the entrepreneurs to providing technical assistance to these organizations that basically provide such wonderful support services for the entrepreneurs. And that's really how we ended up today, what we're doing with all these different organizations. So we basically provide, I call it, we support organizations that want to create entrepreneurship activities in their local communities with a focus on underserved communities or, immigrants or minority groups. Sometimes those three different groups are three different people, and sometimes it's the same person, and sometimes it's two people. So it just depends on which community and which group you're talking about. So that's in a high level what we do. So we usually set up a training program for entrepreneurs, or we're setting up a mentorship program or a funding program or a networking program, something along those lines, or we might be creating a program.
Okay. Thanks for that. Faris, as we've gotten to know each other over the past weeks, we both sort of share a passion about entrepreneurship. Can you give me a quick, provide our viewers with a quick sort of take on how you feel about entrepreneurship, um, and why you're so passionate about it?
Yeah, so thank you, Jeff. And yeah, I'm always admired by your work and what you've done. It's really very powerful and it's really appreciated. And I thank you for the work that you continue to do
Oh,
to
thanks for your comments there, Faris.
entrepreneurs. I would say I'm one of the people that probably, if you were to tell me I was going to be an entrepreneur, I would have told you absolutely no way, because I wanted to be an electrical and computer engineer, and that's really what I wanted to do. And it was really by force, I would say. And as you know, Jeff, there are two types of entrepreneurs, generally speaking, at least a starting point. Wannabes, meaning that they choose to be, and then those who are forced to be, right? Because maybe you can get a job. I'm one of those. So it wasn't like a choice per se, but it was a journey for me. And now that I went through it, I feel like it's so important to expose people to the idea of wanting to own a business. And I feel like it's not about making money or being a rich person. It's really about solving a problem or a need for a person or for a customer, and in return they value it so much that they want to pay you for it. So I look at entrepreneurship as far as from my perspective, and I think more people are now open to this idea. It's a mindset. It's the way you think. It's the way you approach problems. It's the way you approach challenges. It's the way that you look at things. And with the concept of what resources do I have or have access to that can solve this problem or create maybe an opportunity, not necessarily a problem. It could be just an opportunity to provide a service or a product or an assistant for someone else, and in return someone might say this is worth something and they are willing to give you money for it. That's really how I look at entrepreneurship. And I can't say I don't want everybody to be an entrepreneur, although that would be amazing. I know that that's not feasible, but the mindset can be really exposed to so many people that they could be entrepreneurs within their corporation. So you might have heard of entrepreneurship, which is like entrepreneur within a big corporation, or you might call them STEMpreneurship, someone in the STEM world. So you hear all these different new terminology, and I love it because I think it's one way to expose the mindset to the individuals. And for me, entrepreneurship, honestly, Jeff, allowed me to be able to provide for myself and then obviously for my family.
Um, the building on that, Faris, how do you view entrepreneurship as fitting into the, I guess, the discussion these days, or one of the discussion items as a result of a new administration in Washington, and fitting into the equation of being entrepreneurship, fitting into an equation of being a great benefit for the disadvantaged, disenfranchised, and people of color?
Yeah, no, thank you so much for that question. I think it's really vital for many of the communities that you're describing. And part of it is personally, I know that, I mean, I applied for jobs back in the early 90s when I was trying to get a job. And it could have been my English, it could have been how I approached them, it could have been what I was wearing. God only knows, right? I also didn't have much experience. So the community in large, especially if they're underserved or, or immigrant or a minority group, generally speaking, it might be harder for you to get the job than it is to start a business. And because we also grow up in a culture that you just work all the time, that loyalty sometimes, people who especially feel disfranchised feel like if I work for someone, I might not be able to be, I'm loyal so much to them, but they're not loyal to me at all. They could fire me the next day. So helping them start a business can actually motivate them to want to do more work, a greater work, and a better impact. So it could be a pathway for them to really get, and as you know, sometimes if they've been jailed for something and they're trying to get, they call them second citizens for, whatever you want to call them, they're awesome people. And sometimes they just can't get that job. So opportunity for them to start a business and support them correctly, because a lot of times we all know that they don't have all the information that they need, and no one will ever, but at least some better information to help them set it up correctly and help them move in a better path and minimize the risk they might be taking. That's a powerful way to get them a chance to live life like everyone else.
Okay, great. Let's take a look now, Faris, at some of the programs that your company, ISM, sponsors for entrepreneurs. I think that would be really important for our viewers.
Well, you're kind. So I'm lucky because I get to really work with lots of different programs. I've been exposed to probably, I would say, a few hundred programs globally around what would it take to support entrepreneurs. And no matter which way you look at it, there are usually 5 to 7 components, Jeff, right? It's business, right? So it's all about the marketing, it's all about the market, it's all about the management of the cash. It's simple stuff, but everyone looks at them differently. So we have been blessed to offer some of the very well-known international programs like the Kaufman Fast Track program, and we have a breadth of 10 to 15 trainers and facilitators that do that kind of program, and we've been doing it for the past 15 some years. And then we also offer other programs. These are for people who are maybe early stage ideas. They're exploring what to do with their idea. They're not sure which business to start. That's usually the program that we plug them in. We have another program similar that's called Exploring Entrepreneurship, and we use that really to change culture in the communities. One of the things that, Jeff, you know this really well, sometimes there's no culture of support to say start a business. There's a bigger culture to say go get a job. And we as a society, we actually encourage staying in lane and going to get a job much more than take a risk and start a business per se. So, or at least calculated risk. So Exploring Entrepreneurship, we've used that program globally to expose people to the idea, hey, have you ever thought about it? Do you understand how to, what steps can you take? What are the mindsets that you might want to do, and how to calculate your cash and how to make it work? And I'm always blown away of the results, because once you show the people a little bit of tips of insights, their eyes usually open up really wide, or they run. Either way, it's a win, because you either saved someone's life or you help someone move to a better life. And we have, the list is long. I think we have a total of 21 different programs that we offer, from mentorship program that we usually either set up, to training the trainers for the economic developers to work specifically in small business and startup world. There are things that I usually don't play with, which is the large corporations and how to attract and retain them. There are many wonderful people that I work with that can do that. I'm focused more on the small and startup business world, and specifically in the minority and immigrant and underserved communities, because I feel like this is where I could add value to the community. So we have things for startup ideas. We have things for small business to stabilize them, to give them some structure. And then we have some, like our recent one, we did this last year. We started during COVID, not knowing the name initially. And 3 months later, we came up with a name and we came up with a curriculum. And obviously reflecting back on almost 30 years of experience to build it, it's called the Resilient Entrepreneur Program. And that's something that now we have offered in Oman, as a matter of fact, in Palestine, all over the world. And we actually going to be doing it in Russia. I'm getting the translation for it next week or two. And that's about how to keep your business resilient in such tough times. So we have all kinds of range of programs, from startup to scale up, I usually say, and from support services like mentorship or funding or talent development. That's kind of like the areas that we usually dance around with the foundations of, I call it, culture and leadership.
Okay, and Faris, what I found really intriguing and interesting, and I think our viewers will as well, is that these programs you partner with a state economic development department or a city. Can you talk about that for a minute?
Yeah, I believe in partnerships. So, I mean, I could easily offer this to the entrepreneurs themselves, and we do occasionally here and there. But for instance, we're doing a project right now in West Michigan, in a small city, right? And we partner with their economic development agency to say, let's offer something to the communities, because they know their community much better than I'll ever know it. Now, I know how to work with their community, because usually if it's a minority or immigrant or underserved community, I've worked with so many communities all around the world that I can't say that they're all the same. That's not fair. But they all have some similar characteristics that allows me to be able to know how to push those buttons to help them do something. So it's usually an alignment between us and them to provide the service. And that's how we really do it. It's a partnership. It looks like it's usually, so sometimes, like with this, we're doing another thing with another group in Europe, and it's basically all the Mediterranean countries around the Mediterranean Sea are part of this association. And now we are partnering with them to provide something for their members. And the reason I do that, again, is because they know their members really well. We know what we could do with their members. And that partnership works really, really well for both the parties and, more importantly, for the people who participate in it.
Okay. Are these events, Faris, typically focused on underserved communities, people of color, people who've immigrated to the U.S., or are they open to anyone?
So usually they're open to all, but we do focus on these three groups that you mentioned. I would say our partners usually, I would say the people who I attract or they come to the programs, looking back, reflecting back, 60% are probably female. Maybe 60 to 65% are African American, and then maybe about 15 to 20% immigrant, and I'm going to say 15 to 20 more percent more of the, I'm going to call them broader general public, right? So this is like everyone else that might not fit on those three categories. So this is why I say we usually focus. And by the way, underserved communities, sometimes actually it could be a person of white person, right? It's not any of those three groups specifically. It's just a third category that we usually work with. So maybe their income is a little lower than the average or something like that. But these groups, I would say our focus, our work, and I'll give you a specific example. When we first started doing this, one of the organizations was offering an amazing program for that community. And when I first looked at it, I said, wait a second, are you giving them this book to read? And they're like, yeah, we're giving them this book to read. And I'm like, I'm sure no one's reading this book, because it looks like reading it, you have to have almost like a PhD to understand what's going on in there. And the truth comes out about a couple of weeks later that none of the people were reading that book. Although they might have been reading it, they're really not sure what it meant. And when I first started facilitating a program, after about 2 hours of talking about marketing, somebody came and said, so what is really marketing? And I realized, like, we're just, are we kidding each other talking about all this big fancy terminology, and the people who are really participating struggling to digest the information. And if you can digest the information, you can't do anything with it. So we started initially, Jeff, simplifying the message. So rather than say target customer, who's your ideal customer, right? Who would buy this from you? Just simplifying that message. And that's really how we found our niche, right? Now, what we learned later is because we simplified so much, it really can apply to anyone and everyone, and the general public actually can benefit, because you're not coding things for them to start decoding it, especially if someone never went to a business school and they're trying to start a business. What's a marketing strategy? Okay, these are fancy words. So let's talk about, what do you plan to do with the way that you're gonna use this flyer to attract someone to buy from you, right? So simplifying these kind of words are really how we started, by working on specifically minority, immigrant groups, underserved communities. And many times, language was a biggest barrier for them. And we helped simplify that message. And I feel today, this allowed me to also take my programs overseas, because now you didn't have to really know too much English to understand what I'm teaching or what we're discussing in this session. Anyone can understand it. And if you are a PhD person, you could understand it, and you could make it more complex if you choose to, or you could take it and say, I could take this and run, because I completely comprehend what you're saying to me, and I completely understand what I need to do.
Okay, that's great. As a follow-up to that, Faris, for someone in a disadvantaged community or person of color or immigrant, if they're not able to come to one of your live events and can't participate in one of your programs, what comments do you have for them as to becoming an entrepreneur, why they should become an entrepreneur, and as a underserved, disadvantaged immigrant or person of color, what resources are available to them?
Thank you so much for that question. And the truth is, because we have a footprint almost in all the 50 states and all over the world in 60 some countries, we obviously would love to find ways to collaborate with them in their community. But I'll also say this, almost all the communities that we've worked with or never worked with, we have learned that there are some programs that exist in that community. And a lot of times people are just not aware of it. So start asking either by your city economic development agency or state economic development agency. You can start with a chamber sometimes, or sometimes with an incubator or an accelerator, and depending on what kind of business, some of them might want to help them, some of them might not, and they could refer them. But there's usually a powerful network. And there's also another group called SBDC, Small Business Development Center, that is paid by the tax dollars and the SBA. And that's a really another great resource that a lot of times people overlook, and they offer services as well. And also there's another group called SCORE, and there are also a bunch of volunteers that they choose to give back to their community, kind of like what we do with my team on a smaller scale. They do this on a much larger scale throughout the country. That could be another way. But also say,
SCORE, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but SCORE was run by the Small Business Administration, and it was something for retired executives to come back in and provide mentorship, et cetera, right?
exactly, you nailed it. And it's changed over the years. I think there, I would say at least in Detroit and the few chapters I've seen even younger mid-career professionals now volunteering, because they basically, you apply and you say, I want to volunteer. You obviously don't want people who are trying to sell their services there, because they're trying to support small business that sometimes doesn't have the money to do it. But it's usually people who are retired from a specific career trying to give back. But also now I've seen some trend of mid-career level people in it. So maybe not as many, but some of them are in it. But also, I mean, I personally, and I know many people in my space in the same way, just like you, Jeff, right? We blog every week. I've been blogging every week for like almost 5 or 7 years. We do a podcast that's something similar. There are lots of other podcasts are for free. The information is available and it's free. Obviously, if you want it structured and you want it a curriculum and you want it to be in a program, then obviously that costs money. And this is why I'm referring to all these other institutions, because they may be able to offer that for you. But, if someone really wants to do it, so back to your question is, why is it so important? Because I feel it's a really great path for people to create their own journey and to be able to craft it the way they want. Now, just like anything else, it has ups and downs. There'll be days you're going to love it. There'll be days you're going to hate it. And those days could be the same day, the same moment, right? I always tell people something I learned from entrepreneurs before me is like a roller coaster. As high as high and as low as low, and it could be at the same second. You feel like you closed a great deal and then you lost a big deal at the same second, or you close it and they never sign, or they choose not to do it after all, or all the other way around. You never closed it and it went away, and then they come back and say, where did you do it now? So to me, it's just excitement. It's really, for me, it taught me a lot of things. It also exposed me to these wonderful people from all over the world that I would never dreamed of. And it allowed me to travel the world and see so many wonderful people and learn from them, right? So to me, it's an amazing opportunity for so many people that when you choose to provide a service or a product or a technology to the communities that you're living in with the goal of solving that problem, and sometimes they call them these days, social entrepreneurship. I've never worked with anyone that is not socially cautious about their journey, but I'm sure they exist somewhere. I just haven't met them yet, Jeff. Maybe you have with your journey. I don't know. It seems like all the entrepreneurs I meet are so caring for their community, so caring for their causes, and they're not doing it really to get rich and famous, although some of them do. Most of them are really doing it just to either get by, to pay their bills, or to solve a problem for a community that they live in.
That's fair. That's fair. That's really interesting. Faris, as sort of a follow-up, any last thoughts you'd like to leave for our viewers today about what you're doing, about entrepreneurship in general, or anything else?
Well, you're so kind. Yeah. So I would say the best way to do entrepreneurship is to start. If you try to plan it all the time, I will always say this, you'll never have a perfect plan and you're never going to have a finished plan, but to start doing something. Now, I'm not saying jump with your 2 feet, and if that's what you need to do it. But I'm just saying start doing something towards that side hustle or that, entrepreneurship journey, or at least explore it. And then the other thing I would say is reach out. A lot of times entrepreneurs are afraid to ask for help or afraid to be exposed. I'm guilty. And I would say this today, especially with COVID, it's really amazing resources, amazing opportunities to do it. And of course, we, for instance, that Canvas that I just talked to you about a second ago, we offer it for free. You could download a lot of our stuff for free, and you could try to do it yourself. We have all kinds of blogs and podcasts that you could listen to or utilize. The network itself, the actual entrepreneurs are amazing. If you start asking any entrepreneurs for support, a lot of times that I call them the wannabe entrepreneurs are afraid to ask because they think that the entrepreneur is going to keep things to their chest. My experience, most of the entrepreneurs open up their, their heart, their arms, and they're ready to pour in any information that you're ready to take, because they also love seeing other people do really well as well.
Okay, thanks for that. Well, to you, our viewers, thanks for joining us here today. Faris, thanks for spending a few minutes with us here, also at Insider Talks at Emerging Technology Insider. Faris, let's definitely get you back one of these days or months. And again, to your viewers, thanks for joining us. Until next time, this is Jeffrey Friedland. Goodbye.
Thank you so much, Jeffrey. I mean, you're amazing. You're very kind.